for the Weekly Planet Podcast show. So sit back, relax, and give us a go. Scott and Matt and maybe a guest have undertaken an epic pod quest. We're gonna ramble on about movies and books and television and film festivals and directors and all this other stuff that I really know nothing about because they made this really long list of things that they want to talk about and I can't even read through all of them, but it's gonna be great. Okay, start the show.
Hello and welcome to the Daly Planet Podcast, your daily dose of all things movies, TV, books, and anything else we feel like talking about. My name is Scott Daly, Editor-in-Chief of DailyPlanetFilms.com, and I'm joined as always by my co-host and co-editor, Matt Freeman. Matt, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, Scott. Having a great short week here.
Me too. I am so ready for some days off and eating an excessive amount of food.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
But more than that, I am excited because tomorrow, probably when people are listening to this, I will have seen Creed, the new film in the Rocky series that's coming out tomorrow. I am beyond excited about this, and that is what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about Rocky. But before we get into all that, I want to just go over some quick recommendations. There's really no news to talk about this week. It's kind of a slow movie news week, but I saw a bunch of movies because we're in the holiday movie season now that I just wanted to touch on real quick. I saw the new Hunger Games movie, the final one in that series. Didn't like it. I don't want to talk too much about it because I'm still trying to write a review. It's actually it's just not, there's not much to talk about. It's just not very good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I didn't actually read that book. I read the first one, and based on my understanding of the story, it just seems like you can't really save a story that is not sufficiently good in the first place. They made a heroic effort with the first half of this story in the other movie, but if you have to work in the conclusion the way it concludes, it doesn't seem like it's going to work. But of course, I'm speaking as someone who hasn't actually seen it.
No, but you're absolutely right, actually, because the first book was really great, and then they kind of just went downhill from there. And the movies have been doing their best to improve upon the story. I actually think the movies have gotten better as they've gone, but this one actually followed the third book pretty tightly, which hurt it, I think, because it's not a very good book. We talked about that a little bit last week, how sometimes authors have really great ideas, and then that gets them through one book, but then it's popular, and people make them turn it into a series, and I think that's what happened here. I think her ideas were solid for the first book, but were kind of gone by the end.
Yeah, I have this phobia of ever writing a series now. If I ever write a book, I promise myself it's going to be a standalone book because it seems like that's what always happens with series.
I bet you George R. R. Martin will never do another series after he finishes this one.
Yeah.
Do you think, I mean, this is a complete segue, do you think that guy is just bored of his world and just doesn't want to write in it anymore?
Yeah, I mean, that seems pretty likely. Like, he knows that he has to for so many different reasons, but I don't think it really inspires him the way it did. Because, I mean, if you just look at the way he wrote the first books, he wrote them at this incredible pace. He wrote the first, I think, 3 books at this unbelievable pace. And then a combination of, I think, getting less interested in the story and also becoming famous and spending a lot more time interacting with people and going to conventions and things like that. It's just not his obsession anymore.
Right. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, and I think it's become a chore for him as opposed to something he likes doing. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense. Like, the books are so complicated, you can't just write. You can't just sit down and write. You've got to. I mean, he has people that their job is to read his pages and fact check it against stuff he's already said in the mythology of the world. So I'm sure it's just not a fun experience anymore. I can't imagine it.
Yeah, and plus he had all this trouble with the last book where he completely didn't know where he was going with certain things and sort of pulled a Stephen King and just said that, okay, and then these characters arrive here even though it's not entirely plausible, and kind of admitted that he glossed it over.
Yeah, definitely. But that's a complete tangent.
Yep.
Of course, we love getting into Game of Thrones related tangents.
Mm-hmm.
Because as much as we insult it, it's still awesome.
Yeah, we're going to have an article about that soon, actually.
We are. We can look forward to that. But there was another movie that I did see as well that I really, really liked. This is one that's probably going to end up in my top 10 of the year. It's a movie called Spotlight. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, I haven't.
It is a movie about the Boston Globe investigative journalism team that originally broke the Catholic Church priest scandal back in 2002. The church, all the priests abusing kids. This is it's basically a procedural about that investigation, and it's really well done. It's like an ensemble cast. Rachel McAdams, Michael Keaton, and I'm blanking on other people now, but I shouldn't. But it's so good. It's so good.
Okay.
I would recommend that. And if you're Catholic, like I was raised, it will probably destroy your opinion of the church forever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just a very, very well done movie.
Okay, cool. I'll check that out.
And I have one last thing that I want to talk about briefly. Sorry, I'm taking this whole section for myself, but there's the new series Jessica Jones premiered on Netflix on last Friday. I'm about 8 episodes in now, and it's really good. It's everyone. If you like comic book stuff, you need to watch that series. If you don't like comic book stuff, you like private investigator, film noir type stuff, you'll like it. Like it's the kind of thing there. It works for both sets of people, and it's really good. I want to write something about it, but I don't know exactly what. It's hard to write about TV because it's hard to focus on a single storyline within the big, huge arc.
Yeah, I feel the same. I was thinking about that today. Like, how would you even review something like Game of Thrones?
Yeah,
it's beyond scope. Yeah, that's
just like episode by episode recaps. I feel are boring, and I wouldn't want to do that. But yeah.
Jessica Jones. It's I don't quite know how to approach it. Well, for one thing, so you said it came out like a week ago, and somehow there are like 8 episodes, or did they just release the whole season?
Yeah, it's Netflix, so they dropped the whole season at once.
I didn't even know that was how they did things.
Yeah,
shows
that's how
know.
the Netflix original series stuff is all like that.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. Okay. Then that makes it more likely that I'll watch it actually, because I don't want to get stuck watching something and then have to.
And Marvel's had other TV shows. They've had Daredevil on Netflix, which is the same thing. They dropped it all at once. And they had their Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show on ABC, I think. But this is the best TV thing they've done. It's very close to being one of the best just things in general they've done.
Okay.
I think as much as I like the Marvel movies, TV as a medium, I think is probably better suited to tell superhero stories because you can tell long-form stories.
That makes sense.
As opposed to just jumping in for a couple hours.
Yeah, because superhero stories in terms of comic books are always these very long soap opera-esque, very involved, complicated things involving lots and lots of characters, and you can never do that in a movie. So
right,
makes sense.
But Jessica Jones, I mean, you should watch it, Matt, and anyone listening should watch it as well. It's very well done.
Okay, I think I'll definitely give it a try. Sounds. Again, I don't know quite what to make of it because I can't imagine all those elements working well together. But
They do. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, I'm gonna trust you, and I've also read that sentiment a few other places. So I'll
so I guess briefly for people who have never heard of this before, it's basically she's has super strength and is also a private investigator, and she's like recovering from a trauma. Like they literally call it PTSD in the show, where she's encountered another super villain type person who has the ability to make people do what he wants just by telling them to do it. So it's a nice little mixture of how she's really powerful but completely powerless to stop this guy. And it's just, so it really is kind of an investigative show, like a PI. She's trying to find out where this guy is and how to nail him, while also being able to jump really high and punch people really hard.
Perfect.
But Marvel's plan with this is they're going to combine this Daredevil. There's another series coming out about Luke Cage, which is another character, and they're going to make like a TV version of the Avengers. Like I think they're called the Defenders. Just like a small scale version of the same thing where they're going to combine all characters into one show. It's very very ambitious, and I don't know if it's going to work, but this at least was well done.
Okay. That's funny because yeah, that sounds difficult to pull off, but I guess we'll just have to see.
Yeah. But so enough about me. Did you have anything you wanted to recommend?
Yeah, there was this documentary I saw hosted by William Shatner about the start of the Star Trek The Next Generation series. And it's called Chaos on the Bridge. And it was very interesting to me just because I've always loved The Next Generation for as long as I can remember, pretty much. And I had no idea that it was such a fraught enterprise, like that there was so much conflict between the sort of creative heads of the project. Like one little anecdote is that Gene Roddenberry, who is obviously sort of the main guy behind Star Trek, or was at the time, he had this edict that there was to be no conflict between the characters on the show, because this is the 24th or 25th century, and humanity has been morally perfected, and this is his utopia, and all the people, all the characters on the ship should be perfectly aligned, and the writers were just completely didn't know what to do with this because you can't have a drama, you can't have a television drama without conflict. So there was, the first season, it was pretty funny because the people giving the interviews in the show were actually, a big part of the show, and they were saying things like, yeah, the first season is pretty much unwatchable, which I never thought of it that way because I don't actually know which episodes are from which season off the top of my head. But I think there's probably a good point there. And eventually, various creatives become more powerful, and Gene Roddenberry became less powerful. And I think the show kind of hit its stride finally when certain writers came into prominence. And it was a really great documentary, and just in terms of how it showed me a lot of stuff I didn't know, and it also made me think about Next Generation, which I hadn't thought about for a long time. So that was nice.
Yeah, and if you haven't watched Next Generation in a long time, it's all on Netflix.
Oh, really?
Yeah, all of it. So I actually rewatched it all a year or so ago, and I had everything you're talking about that you learned in this documentary. I had no idea, but I agree that the first season was not very great. I mean, it was still great in that I love the series, so I'll love just seeing these characters. But yeah, you can definitely tell the show hits its stride in later seasons. So that's really cool to know. Where is the documentary at?
I believe it was on Netflix.
Netflix has everything. We're just like a podcast advertising Netflix.
Yeah, basically. I mean, that's the only way I get entertainment. So, if you hear an ad from me, then it's probably about Netflix.
Yeah, I mean, I think unless they've taken some of them off, I think Netflix has every Star Trek series on it.
Wow.
All of them. Maybe not the original series, but it definitely has Next Generation. It has Voyager. I think it might even have Enterprise, which I never actually watched.
I might go back and watch the select episodes of The Next Generation that reliably make me cry.
That was such a good show.
Yeah.
And that's what that's what Star Trek was to me. That's what I grew up with. I remember the first time my dad showed me the original series, and I was like, "Wow, this is really hokey."
Yeah, I still haven't seen more than a couple episodes of the original series, and I feel no loss. Sorry.
I mean, I'm sure there's good in there. I mean, a lot of the bad parts when I was first shown it's just technical limitations, and to show a damaged spaceship in space, all they do is like lean it diagonally a little bit. That's when the ship's in trouble, when it's at a diagonal.
Right.
But okay. I mean, there's good stuff. It was a very different kind of show than the Next Generation, and I like the Next Generation version better.
Yeah. I think eventually I'll get around to watching the original series.
probably be worth it.
Yeah.
At least the movies.
Yeah, I've seen those.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into our main event, which is Rocky. The reason I wanted to talk about Rocky, besides the fact that Creed is coming out tomorrow, which I cannot wait. This has been the movie I've been looking forward to all year. But the reason I really want to talk about it is because Rocky is probably one of, if not my favorite movie of all time.
Okay. So why is it your favorite movie, Scott?
I mean, there's a lot of reasons. First of all, it's a really great movie. It's incredibly well done, and we'll get into the details of that. But the reason I like it so much is because this character of Rocky, who is he's just this kind, like, well-meaning but really stupid guy that's like just unhappy with his life, but he's friendly to everyone around him. Like, he's a mob enforcer, but he refuses to actually hurt anyone in order to collect money. Like, he's ordered to break some guy's thumbs, and he won't do it because he's just a nice guy. And he's just this nice guy that just, for whatever reason, hasn't been successful. And the movie is about him not even, like, getting to a point of success, but just, like, coming to a realization of his own inner strength and his own inner ability. And there's just something about that that's just so fun to watch. And, you know, the weird thing about Rocky is every time I tell people that it's one of my favorite movies, people usually laugh or look at me like shocked. And I really think it's because when people think about Rocky, they don't think about this first movie. They think about the Rocky from Rocky 3 or Rocky 4, who was like this cartoonish, like, kind of superhero boxer, like, action star type film. I know you had said that when you thought about Rocky, you thought you had seen the first one, but you actually hadn't.
Yeah, right. I was going to say, to be honest, I'm probably exactly the person you're talking about, because I remember being a kid and watching a bunch of Rocky movies, and prior to about a week ago, when I thought about Rocky, I thought about, you know, the Soviet guy punching the punching bags and you know, sort of ridiculous, you know, almost self-consciously ridiculous idea of this, you know, Rambo as a boxer superhero.
Yeah.
But then I watched, so I thought I was watching Rambo 1 again, but in fact, I think I was probably watching it for the first time. Either that or I had watched it when I was a kid and just found it boring, which is not a knock on the movie. I think it's, the fact is it's more of an adult movie, so it's more plausible that I would just be bored by it when I was a kid. And it was totally not the movie. It was totally not a movie that I was expecting. There's almost no boxing in this boxing movie. It's very sort of sedate and quiet character study, and really surprised me at a number of times. There were a number of scenes where I just couldn't take my eyes off the screen because of the interestingness and almost novelty of what they were doing with the characters on the screen. So yeah, I prior to a week ago, I don't think I would have comprehended why this was your favorite movie, but now I definitely see why it has a place there.
And that's one of the things that's one of the reasons I want to do this podcast too, is because I want people to look at this movie differently. And like, I've had people, like, I told them I was really excited for Creed, and the conversation started, so what's your favorite Rocky movie? Most people say it's Rocky 4. I think Rocky 4 was the most financially successful one of the series. But that really isn't a Rocky movie in my mind. Like, that's the series has taken itself somewhere so far divorced from this original movie. And like, I in the past week, I've watched all 6 of the movies in preparation for both this and for seeing Creed tomorrow. And if you watch them in order, you kind of see that subtle change as the movie changes from a very quiet character study, like you said, into this loud, raucous kind of superhero boxer movie. It kind of gradually happens. But if you were to sit down and take a person who had never seen these movies, sit down and watch the first Rocky, and then watch Rocky 4 right after that, I think they would be just shocked at the changes that happened over the course of these movies. Rocky, he doesn't even like Sylvester Stallone doesn't even act like Rocky in Rocky 4, which I mean I think Sylvester Stallone is one of the most interesting actors ever because he is a really good actor. And he's not just an actor. He wrote these movies. He directed all but this one and I think one other. So he's really is an artist. And this movie is art. It's incredible. Like there's so many small moments like you were talking about with his character. Like one of my favorite moments in the world is when he gets back to his house and he's looking in the mirror and rehearsing the joke he's going to tell Adrian in the morning about the turtle moss or something, because he's just this like it's such an endearing moment because he's just this he's a moron, he's an idiot, he's not a smart guy, but he's so good-hearted and well-meaning, and like he thinks if I just keep showing up at this place and telling this girl funny jokes, eventually I'm going to make her like me.
Yeah, it was interesting to me how he just can't shut his mouth for the entire movie, and this would be annoying. Actually, I'm certain that this would be annoying in real life if you knew someone like this. But in the movie, you're never annoyed really at any point because you're just so on his side because he's such a puppy dog.
Yeah, he really is. Like it's funny because they introduce a dog in the movie, and like Rocky really is like the puppy dog of the neighborhood he lives in. Like everyone knows him, everyone is nice to him, but they also really don't take him very seriously. Like no one takes him seriously, and that's kind of his complaint. And I like what you said. I don't know if you said this on here when we were talking earlier in the week, but he's a guy with a really big chip on his shoulder because he feels like he never was given a shot. And I mean, he says there are reasons for that. That he's left-handed, he's a southpaw, so no one wanted to fight him because boxers don't like fighting left-handed people because it messes everything up. But really, I think what his trainer Mickey says is really the truth here, that he just never really committed to it, because I think Rocky is a guy who's he's lonely in this movie, but he's also very happy, and he really didn't have a lot of ambition. He's unhappy with his spot in life, but he never really seemed really like he wanted to do anything about it.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. It's difficult to put a fine point on, but it was like the movie was showing you how he was perfectly happy with his crappy apartment, actually, as long as he was by himself. And it was only when other people would come over that he would sort of realize that it was crappy and feel really defensive of it. So it's like you said, there's sort of an inner contentment to him, but also he feels very scrutinized and has a chip on his shoulder when other people come into the picture. Right.
The only time you see Rocky really get angry is when people point out insecurities he has in himself. So there's a scene when he's sitting at the bar watching Apollo Creed up on the TV, and like I think the bartender insults Apollo Creed, and like he's like, "You're insulting Apollo Creed? Like he took a shot and he's like the greatest person in the world." And the bartender says something like, "It's like, well, you know, just because you don't feel like you've taken your shot, like I own this business, I'm really happy." And Rocky gets super pissed off and just leaves, and it's because like he's content until he's reminded of what he knows in himself, which is that he feels like it's like he's not living up to his potential,
right?
And he could be something better,
right? He's almost offended by the guy's implication that Rocky's limit would be running a bar,
right?
Because Rocky's like, no, that's not my ambition. My ambition is much greater than that. But also, he hasn't really accomplished anything, so it seems sort of ridiculous for him to behave that way.
And he does blame other people for it. Like, you know, Mickey, his trainer, takes his locker away from him early in the movie before he's even gotten a shot at this title fight. And you know, so he's blaming Mickey for never giving him an opportunity to really get into pro boxing. But Mickey throws that back in his face later in the movie and says basically that, you know, the reason why you never got that shot is because you didn't work for it hard enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting how all that's set up. And I think the coolest part about the shot that he gets is that it has nothing to do with his skill at all. So Apollo picks him for this basic exhibition, gonna pull in money to boxing match, just based off his name. The Italian Stallion, he likes that as part of the show he's creating with this boxing match. So it has nothing to do with Rocky's skill. It has nothing to do with him as a person. It's just blind luck. And I like that because it kind of shows, sometimes in life we don't think we're going to get opportunities until we do, and we have to be willing when these opportunities come to go for it and go all the way, and good stuff happens.
Yeah, right. That's kind of one of the biggest, I don't know, inspiring parts of the movie is that a normal low tier boxer, if they suddenly got a shot at fighting the world champion, they would probably, if they were anything like an average person, they would just be completely overwhelmed and psych themselves out almost immediately and just think like, oh, no matter how hard I train, I can't be as good as that guy. That guy has so much more experience, etc. And, kind of the point of Rocky is that he doesn't get psyched out. He's just like, yeah, I probably won't win, but I'm not going to do anything less than my best.
Right. And it gets to a point where it doesn't even matter if he wins or not.
Mm-hmm.
All he wants to do is make it the 15 rounds. That's all he wants. He wants to be standing when the bell rings. And he says it himself. He says, if that happens, finally I'll feel like I'm not a bum,
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that's my, like, I don't cry very much in movies. That's the moment whenever he finishes that fight and he doesn't even care that he's lost. She's just so happy that he made it all 15 rounds, and he's just screaming for Adrian, and that's all he cares about. And like, it's shot so well because you barely even hear them announce that Creed's the winner. Like the camera just stays tight on Rocky's face, which is destroyed, by the way, which is another thing I love. The makeup work in this movie, like his face is just demolished. And that's one thing they really took away in the later movies too. And like Rocky 4, like he's bleeding and a little bruised, but like in this, like he doesn't even look like he can see out of either of his eyes.
Yeah, they have to cut one of his eye flaps.
Yeah,
so you can see.
I couldn't believe that. Yeah, but yeah, no, like there's not a part of this movie that I don't love, and the one thing I wanted to talk about a lot was his relationship with Adrian, because it's such an important part of the movie. Because it really, like, I don't even consider this a boxing movie really. This is a movie just about a boxer, and it's a love story about this guy falling in love with the woman of his dreams, basically. But it's handled in such a weird, different way. So, I mean, I think the first date scene when he takes her home to his apartment is one of the creepiest scenes ever.
Yeah.
And like, from the perspective of a guy, it's creepy. I can't even imagine it from the perspective of a woman watching it, because Adrian the entire time is trying to make her boundaries very clear and make it very clear what she is and isn't comfortable with. And like, Rocky either doesn't care, or what I think is just he's too stupid to even know what he's doing is making her uncomfortable. And so like, he invites her back into his house. She doesn't want to. She finally comes up, and then he like gets in the house, like hangs up his coat and his hat, which on knives, by the way, his coat rack is a machete, which is wonderful set dressing, and that's awesome.
Yeah, there was some shot in there where he says something sort of passive aggressively about like, well, why are you uncomfortable? And like right next to his head in the shot is a knife stuck into the wall.
Right, and then he takes his shirt off, so he's just wearing his tank top undershirt, and he says it's because it's warm in his apartment, and like, honestly, I completely believe him. I don't think he did that to try to be like creepy or try to be like, I'm going to show off my muscles. I think he was just warm, and he's just clueless as to how that would make her feel. But the thing is, like, Adrian loves it. Like, as uncomfortable as she is, like, the attention that he's paying to her is attention that she's never gotten her entire life. Because she's the entire life lived with her terrible brother Paulie, who does nothing but abuse her and not physically, but make her feel make her feel like she's worthless and not important and not good enough. Like, I think earlier in the movie he says something to the effect of, she's almost 30, she's starting to dry up. It's like, so I mean, Adrian's transformation in this film is almost as shocking as Rocky's, and they do it in kind of a cheesy physical way. Like, I mean, when we first see her, she's wearing glasses and she's dressed very down, and then every time we see her after her and Rocky make out on the floor of his apartment, she's like very dressed up, like she apparently doesn't need glasses anymore. And like, I get that that's kind of stupid, but also it's just a way of cinematically showing how much more confident in herself she's become because of her relationship with him. And I think that all boils over in when she finally confronts her brother in that one scene around Christmas time, when she yells back at him and ends up moving out of the house to stay with Rocky for a while. Yeah,
that's one thing I want to point out, is how many separate awkward scenes of domestic conflict there are in this movie. There's that scene where there's, he throws the turkey out the door, and the prior scene when Rocky comes over and she doesn't expect him and she's hiding in her room and he has to talk her out.
Yeah.
And it's all very uncomfortable. It's really, like you said, the Adrian character, it's a very weird, it's a very weird character type that you don't see a lot. When the movie starts, the camera won't even, like, you don't even see her face really. She's always sort of looking away from the camera with her hair shielding her face, or she's behind something, like she's actually hiding behind,
like that bird cage, right? Yeah,
exactly. You can't get a good look at her, and you're almost thinking, I'm not even entirely sure what the movie wants you to be thinking, but I was thinking, are they trying to make me think that, are they trying to make me think, why does he want to be with her? Is that the thought that they're injecting into my head with this scene? Because he seems like this gregarious guy. He may be dumb, but he seems really outgoing and gregarious. Why is he pursuing this woman who seems to want nothing to do with him and seems to be like a non-entity? And I guess that's setting you up for what's coming. But it was really, really unusual way to introduce a character.
Yeah. And I think it's cool that she never really looks him in the eye. Like, he tells his stupid, dumb jokes, and the camera shows you that she likes them. But like you said, like, you see her smirk, but her hair's in the way, so you barely see her little smiles. And you barely see that she's as into him as he is to her. They show that, but it's never clear. And I think you're right. I think we are supposed to see, what does he see in this girl? And the thing is that Rocky sees something in Adrian that nobody else does. And Rocky sees something in Adrian that Adrian didn't even see. And that's why, like, their love story is so great, because she, over the course of this movie and then the course of the series, almost transforms into this completely different character, who she's assertive, she's strong-willed. I love the argument that her and Paulie have, because you have the scene at Thanksgiving where Paulie takes the turkey and throws it out the window, and Adrian just cries and storms off. And then you have the scene at Christmas where Paulie goes ballistic with a bat, and Adrian like screams back at him. And it's a great scene, because it's like, there is a lot of uncomfortable domestic squabbles in this movie, and they're shot so really. Like, when Paulie and Adrian are screaming at each other, I can barely understand what they're saying. Yeah. They're not even really speaking lines to me anymore. They're just screaming at each other. And I just think that's so impactful and powerful. And then you have that scene where she finally just screams at him and storms off. And Rocky walks in a room and she's like, "You want a roommate?" Which I found adorable, was an actual roommate where they're not sharing the same bed or something. He gives her the bed and is just sleeping on the couch. Even though by this point I'm assuming they're having sex with each other, but I thought that was just adorable. Yeah, it's like, I mean, we could talk about Paulie. I mean, Paulie's a fascinating character too, because Paulie's really a scumbag, and Paulie really never stops being a scumbag. Like, in Rocky 2, Paulie gets pissed off at Rocky. In Rocky 2, Paulie takes Rocky's job as the enforcer that Rocky was doing, and then Rocky ends up having to take a job at the meat packing plant because his stuff isn't really working out. And Paulie's not really helpful at all there. In Rocky 3, Paulie's jealous of Rocky's final success. And then Rocky 5, Paulie's the one that causes Rocky to go bankrupt because he gives power of attorney to their scumbag accountant who loses all their money and doesn't pay their taxes. So it's like, Paulie's not a good person through any of these movies, but he's always Rocky's best friend. And it's because Rocky's such a nice guy that he's a person that's able to look past all these faults and see a person who really is unhappy in their life and trying to do good, but just hasn't gotten the breaks that Paulie has, that Rocky has.
Yeah. It reminds me of the scene in the last one that came out, Rocky Balboa, where he sees this stray dog, or this dog in a pound actually, who's like sitting on the floor and, you know, looking half dead, and he gives kind of a little soliloquy about how, you know, the dog doesn't look like it's doing anything, but it's doing a lot. It's saving energy. It's watching, and it's just showing like how, you know, as sort of dumb as he is in his behavior, he's actually very observant about people and people's nature, or in this case the dog, but people also, and how he sort of, in the same way as he sees what's inside Adrian, even when no one else does, he sees something in Paulie that no one else does, including the audience. But we just sort of know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like, I love Paulie, but I wouldn't have been friends with Paulie after all the stuff that he did.
Right.
And it's cool. Like, you mentioned Rocky Balboa. That's actually my second favorite movie in this 6 movies. It's so sad, but some of the things, it allows Paulie to finally kind of like realize and like come to terms with himself. Adrian's dead by Rocky Balboa, and Paulie gets mad at Rocky for reminiscing about her because he feels so guilty about how he treated her when she was alive. Mm-hmm. So it's like even Paulie has an arc throughout these films, and they're just it's so great. The other thing I want to talk about, switching gears again, is Creed and his character in this movie. Mm-hmm. I like a lot that they didn't set up Creed to be a bad person. Yeah. I like that it didn't even really focus on him. That everything in this boxing match is actually just Rocky versus himself, and Creed's just the opponent that's big enough to get him there. So I like that he's not like, I watch a lot of boxing movies where they make the opponent a bad guy. They show him to be a jerk, and to make you hate him and make you want the main character to win. But you want Rocky to win just because he's a nice person. You don't hate Creed, and they made Creed a jerk in Rocky 2, but that was deliberate because that whole thing is about him versus Creed, actually. Mm-hmm. But in this movie, he's always in the background, and he's kind of represents the business part of the whole thing, which is another whole interesting thing because Sylvester Stallone and the director John Avildsen didn't like boxing. Mm-hmm. They don't like they made a boxing movie, considered one of the best sports films ever made, but they didn't really care about boxing. So it's interesting to see how they shoot boxing and how they showed the whole process without really probably knowing very much about the sport, or how to shoot it. I think Raging Bull came out about the same time as this movie, I think. And both these two movies told boxing stories very differently. I think Raging Bull is probably technically a better movie, but I like this one more just because Raging Bull is a lot more pessimistic and sad.
Yeah, I was actually reading, it's funny you mentioned that. I was just reading about Raging Bull because I wanted to sort of contrast it against this movie because I guess I have to offer, you know, a criticism of Rocky, the first Rocky, which is that I was surprised at how bad the boxing scenes were. And what I mean by that is like they don't have what I'm used to seeing. So in that sense, I'm judging them unfairly because I'm judging them against like a modern boxing movie,
Right.
like the Russell Crowe one or whatever, where it's like we've almost converged on this boxing style of how boxing should be shot, where it's like the camera is swooping around the boxers and taking these rapid shots, and you're seeing the gloves smash into the person's face and spit fly and the blood spray and everything. And in Rocky, I think when it was made, it was just like they hadn't innovated those ideas of how to film boxing, because the camera is usually outside of the ring. You'll see somebody jab, and you'll see Sylvester Stallone sort of jerk his head in a completely different direction. And it actually took me a few minutes during the first fight to realize that he was actually supposed to be getting hit.
Well, they did. I mean, they did actually get hit in this movie. So there are scenes like that where they're definitely aping, but there are parts of this that was filmed where they're actually smacking each other around.
Yeah.
But I mean, I agree. I think that this was a very different way of showing boxing, and I'm curious as to how Creed is going to do it, if it's going to try to ape this style or do its own. I hope it does its own thing. Mm-hmm. But
yeah,
no, I mean I agree with you, and the boxing is it's interesting that they filmed it from a kind of standoffish, on the other side of the ropes style, because it's almost like they're saying this isn't important, like this isn't the important part, and I think that's even further demonstrated by the fact that the boxing, really, we see 2 rounds and then we montage through the rest of them till the last one, because like this isn't important. Like you should care about what's going on inside the character's mind, not what's actually happening between the 2 guys punching each other.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and also I mean my criticism is not even really a criticism; it's more of an observation. It's kind of like nobody's going to say the Death Star trench scene in Star Wars was bad. It's like, well, it was actually amazing at the time, but in context of modern CG, it doesn't quite hold up. But
well, and
yeah,
I even think that, I mean, compared to Raging Bull approached it stylistically very different. So I mean, compared to that, the boxing is not filmed as well either. So, I mean, that's a very fair criticism. But the directing work everywhere else in the movie, I think, is great. Like, everyone thinks about when you think Rocky, you think of the scene of him on top of the steps, like with his hands in the air, right? Mm-hmm. And that's just, I'm convinced that even if that scene isn't ingrained in your mind and ingrained in our pop culture, like, I bet when people saw that originally, like, you just knew that was going to be like a moment that sticks with everyone, because like the way it's shot and the way, like, with the score in the background and the reveal of the city behind him, like, it's just perfect. It's just perfect. And there's all kinds of little moments like that, like at the very end of the movie when he's screaming for Adrian. Like, these moments become ingrained in our pop culture for a reason, is because they're so impactful and they're so iconic. And like, this won Best Director, and I'm so glad it did, because it is just incredible work.
Mm-hmm. Did this win Best Picture?
It did.
Yeah. We talked about that.
Yeah.
That's I didn't know that somehow.
See, most people don't know that, and that's like when I started at the beginning of this talking about, when I tell people this is one of my favorite movies, they don't believe it, because people look at this as, they think of this as a joke, action movie, and that's how they think of Sylvester Stallone. And part of that's pretty earned, because Sylvester Stallone has one of the weirdest careers. Like, he'll do something really smart like this, and then he'll do terrible movies that don't make any sense. Like, I mean, he's such a weird person. He's a brilliant person, but he's very strange.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking with Michael Grubb the other day, off the podcast, about how you should watch movies. You should watch the history of cinema backwards, and in other words, like, you should if you're going to go on a project of watching a whole bunch of important movies, then you should start with the more recent ones and work your way backwards, because that will make it more clear it'll make the stylistic shifts more clear, and it'll make the innovations that you're seeing in the movies more clear, which is relevant because sometimes you'll just watch a movie with no context and not understand why anyone ever liked it, and only by watching it sort of in a chronological context do you understand that this movie innovated several things that you now see all the time and take for granted. I think one reason, Rocky won Best Picture is that it actually did a lot of things that I am probably just blind to, even when I'm watching it. I'm aware that it's a good movie, but it probably isn't even hitting me the same way as it hit audiences when it first came out, because those audiences had not been overexposed to those stylistic tropes, whatever they are.
Right, yeah. I mean, like, every sports movie uses the training montage, the musical cues. Like, yeah, you're right. So many of the things that this movie employs is something that has been aped hundreds of times. And that's why I think the legacy of this movie is that stuff, and that's why people don't think about it really being this quiet, small movie about a working class guy and living in Philly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the core of the film, but that's not the part that people think about.
Right. I wanted to make this point earlier, but again, it reminds me a lot of Rambo, in the sense that I also thought that Rambo was this completely over the top, not even fully taking itself seriously, bloody action movie franchise with no redeeming qualities. And then a few years ago, I watched the first Rambo movie.
Yeah, First Blood.
First Blood, and it affected me much the same way watching this Rocky movie just affected me this last week, where I was like, this is not the movie that I thought I was sitting down to watch. This is a sad movie about a Vietnam vet who's feels really alienated and comes home, and then it segues into violence, but the violence is never actually gloried in. It's actually all sort of gut wrenching because you're like, no, calm down, Rambo.
He's killing police officers.
Right, and yeah, you feel sorry for everyone involved.
Yeah. First Blood ends with him, crying in the arms of another person. Like, yeah, right. It's so divorced from what Rambo became in those later movies. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you're right. I mean, that's a really great comparison. That Rocky is really the same way. And don't get me wrong, like, I'm so obsessed with this character that I love every single one of these movies. Like, even Rocky IV, which I recognize has a lot of problems in it. It's a very confused movie that really wasn't sure what it wanted to do, but I still love it because I love this character so much. But like, to me, this movie is like leaps and bounds above every single other one in the series. Like, it's not even close.
Yeah, I mean, to my, I don't know. I haven't seen the other ones in a long time, but I know I have seen most of them. And to my mind, it's just a completely different kind of movie. This is a serious movie. I almost felt like I was watching a Scorsese film at certain points. Just the feeling. I can't really describe it any other way than that. Mm-hmm. And the other movies are sort of more garish, cartoonish. They're supposed to be more fun. They're supposed to be more entertaining. I mean, this movie is obviously supposed to be entertaining, but it's very concerned about getting its artistic message across first and foremost. So yeah, again, just very different types of movies. Yeah,
and I think the closest one to achieving the same kind of tone that this one had was Rocky Balboa.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is crazy to me because I think that was 2005 or 2006 when that movie came out. A movie like that, I can't believe that got made. Like, I think just because of the name, but like, that's a movie that it feels very much like a 70s movie. And just that in 2005's Hollywood that movie could get made and be as universally loved as it was is a testament to, I think, Sylvester Stallone's skills.
Yeah.
And when he's a good actor, and that's what I want everyone to understand. People don't think of Sylvester Stallone as a good actor. They lump him in the same category as Arnold a lot. As these big action stars that can't really act but are good at action stuff. I don't think that's fair at all. when he's trying, he acts the shit out of these movies. And I think in 4 he kind of stopped doing that, but in this film and in Rocky Balboa, and I'm hoping in Creed, he does really great. I've heard there's already Oscar buzz for supporting actor for Creed.
Cool.
And that'd be awesome, because he was nominated for this but didn't win.
Okay.
Actually, they were all nominated. I'm looking at it right now. Talia Shire was nominated for Adrian. Burgess Meredith, who played Mickey, and Burt Young, who played Paulie, were both nominated for supporting.
Oh, wow. I mean, all you have to do to see that he's a good actor, just in context of this conversation, is compare the character he plays in, the final Rambo movie with the character he plays in Rocky Balboa, and it's like he's a similar age in both of them, but it's a completely different character in every possible way. Like you forget you're looking at Sylvester Stallone, and that's, the correct goal for any actor.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, I mean, I think I could talk about Rocky all night, and if you want me to, I'll keep going. But I think the main thing that I wanted to do, the reason I wanted to have this podcast, is I wanted to explain once and for all to people that are always asking me why I love this movie so much. And I hope I've done that. I'm glad that in doing that, I got to introduce it to you, because I hope you see how different this was than from everything you thought it was going to be.
Definitely.
And for all those people out there that have never seen these movies for some crazy reason, Rocky 1 through 5 are all on Netflix right now. The only one that's not on Netflix is Rocky Balboa, which is also definitely worth seeing, though. But before I go, I wanted to give the definitive Scott Daly list of these movies in order from best to worst. So this is it. Once this will become official, and everyone that disagrees is objectively wrong. So,
okay.
Number 1 will be Rocky. Number 2 will be Rocky Balboa. Number 3 will be Rocky 3. Number 4 will be Rocky 2. Number 5 will be Rocky 5. And number 6 will be Rocky 4. And that's the correct order.
Okay.
I'll put that in the show notes, because it probably doesn't sound good to listen to it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to need to study that and memorize it so that I can rattle it off to strangers.
And I'm really interested to see where Creed falls in that list. I'm really hoping near the top.
I'm wondering where you would place, looking at his other movies, looking at the list of his other movies, where you would place Judge Dredd within that sequence.
Sylvester Stallone is such a crazy actor.
I know. It's really funny to look at this list. I'm not going to read off the names, but just some crazy, Ants. And I loved him. I frankly loved him in Ants as the voice of one of the ants. And I loved
he was
him
great.
in Judge Dredd. I loved him in Judge Dredd. Judge Dredd is such a fun movie if you accept it for what it is. I realize it's a terrible movie, but it's really fun. And he's actually trying to do what he's supposed to do for that role, so it's fine.
Yeah.
You probably would prefer that I not mention Judge Dredd on this discussion, though.
I mean, I don't hate Judge Dredd. I think you're right. I think it's a fun movie. It's not good, but I don't think it has to be good.
No, it's fine.
The remake of Dredd was much better. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Yeah, the remake was a totally different tone and everything, but yeah, I agree that it was better.
Who's the annoying comedian in Judge Dredd?
Rob Schneider?
Oh, yeah, Rob Schneider.
Or Reiner, or what? Yeah, Schneider, yeah.
Oh, he's awful.
Yeah.
It would have been a better movie if they just written him out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you do need annoying comic relief, though.
Yeah, but...
Just not him.
No. Man, so I'm looking at his filmography now. The Rambo movies have the most confusing naming convention ever. It's First Blood, Rambo, First Blood Part 2, Rambo 3, and then just Rambo.
Yeah.
That's so confusing. Oh, I forgot about Demolition Man. Man, this is a fascinating list.
Right. It is fascinating because like I just said, I'm looking at these and I'm like, oh, that was him. And that's the sign of a good actor to me is if you're like nobody's ever like, oh, that was Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator 2. It's like, of course it was. Like,
right.
You know any American can name all of the Arnold Schwarzenegger movies off the top of their head, but I can't even get close to doing it with Stallone because I don't see Stallone when he's playing roles usually.
Arnold, no matter what he's doing in a role, he's playing Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think. And Stallone's not like that.
Yeah.
Do you know when Rocky first came out, they compared him to Brando?
I mean, no, I didn't know that, but
he's like, I'm not a method actor, I can't do that. But that's just crazy to me.
Yeah.
That how he was perceived when that movie first came out to how he's perceived now. And I mean, a lot of that has to be his fault because he's taken a lot of these movies that have warped people's image of him. But
yeah,
man, it's crazy. But to wrap this whole thing up, Rocky's an excellent film. I'm really actually glad that you hadn't seen it, because I haven't really had a conversation with a person who hadn't seen it, didn't really know what they were getting into, and got to see it for the first time. So I'm glad that we got to have this conversation, and you did point out some stuff to me that I had never even noticed. So it's always good to be able to approach movies that I've seen hundreds of times from a new angle. So I appreciate you for that.
Oh, well, yeah, thanks for drawing my attention to this one. I definitely feel, enriched. And
hopefully you get to see Creed when it comes out on Netflix.
Yeah.
In 6 months.
Yeah. I'll look forward to that.
I'll let you know. I'll see it tomorrow, and I can't wait. There'll be a review and everything. Okay. I've got 5 reviews coming down the pipe right now, so eventually they'll probably drop, not at the same time, but back to back to back. But
yeah. And while you're waiting, you can read my newly posted review of nonfiction book.
Oh yeah, we get to plug you today.
Yeah. Super Intelligence by Nick Bostrom.
Yeah, that was a really interesting article to me. Especially since I don't really think about the science part of artificial intelligence, because my whole worldview is through the lens of movies. So it's cool to know that people are actually talking about this stuff seriously.
Yeah, and it's something that I think about all the time, so it was a pleasure to be able to share it with people. Also, we don't really usually talk about nonfiction, but I think nonfiction definitely has a place on in a discussion, especially this book because of what it was doing. It's not just a compendium of information. It's almost a way of framing a debate, which is sort of what a lot of works of fiction do in their own way. So,
yeah, no, I agree. I will never say no to sharing something interesting with people, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. So I try to read a lot of nonfiction books. I try to go back and forth. So if I read a fiction book, I'll read something nonfiction next.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good books out there. So yeah. Mine are mostly film related because I'm crazy. But I'm reading an editing book right now by a famous editor that's fascinating.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, well, maybe you should review those because I'm curious about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe I'll do that. In the meantime, Matt, where can you be found on the interwebs?
I'm on Twitter at MORIDINAMAEL, and that will be in the show notes. I should just start saying, just look in the show notes.
Yeah. I am also on Twitter at ScottDaly85. It's DALY. Our website Twitter is at DalyPlanetFilms.com. If you're listening on iTunes, please subscribe, review, comment, share, all the stuff. We're trying to reach a wider audience, and any help you could be would be very appreciated. You can also check out everything we do at www.dalyplanetfilms.com. As I mentioned, I've got some movie reviews coming down the pipe. Matt wrote an excellent piece, so we'll link that to that. I also wrote a piece last week about all the movies that are coming out that I'm looking forward to, some of which have already come out, and one of those was Mockingjay, and I was disappointed. But you're guessing on these looking forward to lists, so you never know. But I think that's all we had to talk about this week. Matt, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Scott.
Happy Thanksgiving to you, and happy Thanksgiving to everyone else out there.
Yeah,
and,
happy Thanksgiving.
I don't know. We don't have a plan for next week, do we?
No.
We'll have to make something up.
Yeah, but that'll be great.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.